He fought off the German army with stones when he ran out of bullets. But his bravest act wasn't fighting. It was giving his last breath so his commander could live.
In the history of the United States Marine Corps, there is one battle that stands above the rest. It is the birthplace of the modern Marine legend, Belleau Wood, June 1918. If you were a German soldier looking across those wheat fields, you didn't see men coming at you. You saw something else. You saw soldiers who dove into machine gun fire, soldiers who refused to retreat even when 50% of their unit was dead on the ground. You saw men with a ferocity that was terrifying. The Germans wrote letters home calling them Teufelhunden, devil dogs. But legends aren't born out of thin air. They are born out of moments of absolute madness. This is the story of one of those moments. It's the story of a gunnery sergeant named Fred Stockham, a man who found himself in the middle of a slaughterhouse without a single bullet left in his gun. Most men would surrender. Some would run. Fred Stockham picked up a rock. The hell of Belleau Wood. To understand what Stockham did, you have to understand the ground he was standing on. June 13, 1918. The Germans were throwing everything they had at the American lines to stop the advance on Paris. They were using high-explosive artillery that turned the dense forest into a jagged wasteland of splintered oak and churned mud. Gunnery Sergeant Stockham was with the 96th Company, 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. He was a veteran, the kind of NCO who knew the sound of incoming artillery before it hit. The kind of man the younger Marines looked at when they were scared, just to see if he was scared. And on this night, he wasn't scared. He was busy. The Germans launched a massive counterattack. They were swarming through the ravines, trying to cut off Stockham's platoon. The fighting was hand-to-hand. It was brutal. It was intimate. Stockham's commanding officer was a young lieutenant named Clifton Cates. Now, remember that name, Clifton Cates. He was a rising star. But in that moment, he wasn't an officer. He was just another target. A piece of shrapnel, or perhaps a bullet, slammed into Cates. He went down. Stockham didn't leave him. He grabbed the lieutenant by his webbing and dragged him into a shallow, scooped-out firing position in the earth. They were cut off. The rest of the company had pulled back. It was just the sergeant, the wounded lieutenant, and the German army closing in. Stockham raised his rifle. He saw the gray uniforms moving through the smoke. He squeezed the trigger. Bang! He worked the bolt. He aimed. He squeezed. Click! He reached for his ammo pouches. Empty. He checked his pockets. Empty. The most terrifying sound in the world is the silence of your own weapon when the enemy is walking toward you. The Germans were close now, maybe 30 or 40 yards. They had Mauser rifles. They had grenades. They had bayonets fixed, gleaming in the flashes of artillery. They knew the Marines were trapped. They were advancing slowly, confident that the kill was easy. Fred Stockham looked at his empty rifle. He looked at his wounded lieutenant. He could have surrendered. No one would have blamed him. But Fred Stockham was a devil dog before the name even existed. Stockham stood up. He didn't put his hands up. He didn't wave a white flag. He stood up to his full height, exposing himself to the enemy fire. He looked down at the mud and debris in the trench. He grabbed a jagged rock, a piece of dried, hardened mud, a discarded piece of equipment, and he threw it. He wound up like a baseball pitcher and hurled the rock at the lead German soldier. Then he started screaming. And I don't mean shouting orders. I mean screaming. He unleashed a torrent of insults, curses, and Marine Corps profanity that echoed through the woods. Imagine the confusion of the German soldiers. They are expecting a surrender. Instead, A crazed American is standing on the parapet, dodging bullets and throwing stones at their heads. He threw another rock, and another. He was bluffing with his life. He was acting with such sheer, unadulterated aggression that the Germans hesitated. They stopped firing. They ducked. They thought, "This is a trap. No one attacks a squad of riflemen with rocks unless he has a machine gun team waiting to ambush us." That hesitation, that brief moment of confusion caused by Stockham's funk factor, bought them time. It allowed the rest of the platoon to lay down covering fire. The Germans fell back, unsure of what kind of maniacs they were fighting. Stockham dropped back into the trench, panting, alive. He had won the fight with geology and attitude, but the Germans weren't done. The artillery started up again, but this time the explosions were different. They were softer. Thump, thump, thump. And they didn't smell like gunpowder. They smelled like garlic. They smelled like horseradish, mustard gas. This was the horror of World War I. Mustard gas isn't like tear gas. It's an oil-based blistering agent. If it touches your skin, you get third-degree burns. If it touches your eyes, you go blind. If you inhale it, it dissolves the lining of your lungs, and you drown in your own fluids. It is a slow, agonizing way to die. A thick yellow cloud began to settle into the low ground, right where Stockham and Cates were hiding. "Gas! Gas! Gas!" Stockham moved instantly. It's instinct. You hold your breath, you close your eyes, and you rip your gas mask out of its carrier. You have about 6 seconds before the damage is permanent. Stockham got his mask out. He was ready to put it on. Then he looked at Lieutenant Cates. Cates was wounded, bleeding, and lying in the dirt. He was fumbling for his own mask. He pulled it out. It was shattered. A bullet or a piece of shrapnel from the earlier fighting had smashed the lens and ripped the canister. It was useless. The gas was rolling over the lip of the trench. Time stopped. Fred Stockham held his own mask in his hands. It was the only thing keeping him from a torturous death. He looked at the mask. He looked at the lieutenant. There was no conversation. There was no debate. There was no, "You take it," no, "You take it." Stockham took the pristine mask, his own lifeline, and he pressed it onto the face of Lieutenant Cates. He tightened the straps. He checked the seal. He made sure the officer could breathe. And then Fred Stockham took a deep breath of the poisoned air. Now, in a movie, the hero would die instantly. But reality is cruel. Mustard gas takes time. For the next several hours, the battle raged on, and Gunnery Sergeant Stockham kept fighting. He helped evacuate Cates to safety. He returned to his men. He directed their fire. He reorganized the line, all while the gas was eating him alive from the inside out. He was coughing violently. His eyes were swelling shut. His skin was beginning to blister and burn under his uniform, but he refused to leave his post until he was sure, absolutely sure, that every single one of his men was safe. Only when he collapsed, unable to stand, did he allow the medics to take him. Lieutenant Clifton Cates survived. Because of that mask, he lived. He didn't just live, he thrived. Cates went on to fight in World War II. He led Marines at Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima, and eventually he became the 19th Commandant of the Marine Corps, the highest-ranking Marine in the world. But he never forgot the sergeant in the wheat field. Fred Stockham died 4 days after the battle. It was a painful, horrific death. He spent his final moments in agony, his lungs destroyed by the gas he inhaled so his commander could live. It took the government 21 years to make it right. In 1939, Fred Stockham was finally awarded the Medal of Honor. We talk a lot about bravery in war. Usually, we mean killing the enemy. We mean shooting straight or storming a bunker. But the greatest act of bravery in Belleau Wood didn't involve a gun. It didn't involve a bullet. It involved a man who fought off the enemy with rocks because he was too stubborn to quit, and a man who looked at a piece of rubber and glass, his only chance of survival, and gave it away. Fred Stockham gave Lieutenant Cates his breath, and in doing so, he breathed life into the legend of the United States Marine Corps. This is Sergeant Narrates, No Man Left Behind.